We got a special guest with us on the line. I want to introduce you to the former assistant U.S. attorney in Northern California. His name is John O'Connor. John, how are you, sir?
Just fine.
Um,
Great to be on your show.
Absolutely, sir. I appreciate you that you appreciate you having the time this morning. We have I've got this book of yours now. I see it here on Amazon. It's due out on November the 5th of this year. It's called Postgate: How the Washington Post Betrayed Deep Throat, Covered Up Watergate, and Began Today's Partisan Advocacy Journalism. What made you want to write this book, sir?
Well, actually, I didn't start out trying to write it. Part of what I do in the book is it's half a memoir, and I talk about my dealings with the Washington Post and trying to do my job as a lawyer and sort of the fellow who is the spokesman for Mark Felt, a.k.a. Deep Throat. And I promised the family that I would tell his story for history, and along the way sort of got obstructed, as I talk about in the book. And the long and short of this, I stumbled into it, Paul. I stumbled into this and was very surprised when I found what I found. Let me put it that way.
Really? So,
Yes.
normally, you think about this idea of protecting sources is something that's very sacred in journalism, and that wasn't the case?
Well, think about this, Paul. One of the fellows who sort of made source protection the golden rule of journalism was, of course, Bob Woodward, through his talk about Deep Throat. Everybody thought how wonderful he's protecting Deep Throat. But if we think about it for a second, probably 1 billion people know or quickly learned that there was a major source, and there was a description of him. And I was able to piece together by 1976 or so who the source was. I could figure it out, and other people could if they thought about it a little bit. So was that really protecting a source? That's my first issue. And here's a fellow, and I think Woodward told everybody he was going to reveal Mark's name after he died. Well, I'm not so sure Mark wanted that either.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not so sure the source was protected here. I agree that source protection is a very good thing, and the irony of it is that source protection became a paramount value because of Deep Throat, and yet at the same time, ironically, as I talk in my book, he was not being protected.
Wow. Man, this is.
Does that make any sense to you?
well, yeah. I mean, it does. I mean, the fact you representing him is a big deal. And I see here you talk in your book about the real truth about the Watergate scandal. The real truth. I mean, now we hear a lot about Watergate today, but it's all kind of hoping that some sort of Watergate type scandal will undo the Trump administration, that sort of thing. But what do you think the real truth behind Watergate was?
Well, I mean, there's no doubt, Paul, that they caught Nixon covering up. They had a White House tape there, and he had an act of covering up there, and he probably also there's another one where he probably condoned hush money. So there's no doubt of his technical guilt. He's guilty, as was Bill Clinton, and others probably have done the same thing. But the question is, what was Watergate about? And did the press really, through the Washington Post, really convey the truth about it? If the truth were really known, the discussion about whether Nixon should be impeached, whether he should be removed from office, would be entirely different. And when we have a criminal trial, the accused always gets all the exculpatory and extenuating and mitigating evidence. And it's the thrust of my book that the public did not get it in this case. I think we see today, when we get reporting about the Russian collusion investigation and so forth, how important it is for the public to really be informed. The people who, understandably, really disliked President Trump and pinned all their hopes on this Russian collusion investigation. I mean, I do my own research, and I thought they were being badly misled by the press. And then disappointed when Mueller's report comes out and says there was never a shred of collusion evidence, really is what it really amounts to. And I feel bad for them because I think they're misled by the press. So I don't, all the facts did not come out. And the most glaring one being in Watergate was the involvement of the CIA. And had people known about that, it would have cast an entirely different light on Watergate.
Really? So now that's interesting too, because if you are following now this investigation of the original investigation, what sparked this Russia collusion narrative, some people are thinking it was some sort of intelligence operation as well. So I mean that's an interesting parallel there.
Oh, absolutely. There's no doubt about it. In the Russian collusion investigation, this was set up from the beginning. One can tell that from the evidence. Like I say, I do my own research on these things, and that was very clear that it was really a setup, and the public was misled. For instance, just let me give you one example, Paul. When George Papadopoulos gets indicted for lying to the FBI about being contacted by Joseph Mifsud, and it really was very technical lies about whether he was with the campaign when Mifsud talked to him. And I think probably, like everyone else, didn't want to be associated with the Russian meddling thing at all, so he denied it. He denied talking to Papadopoulos. Papadopoulos denied talking about Mifsud after he was on the campaign and named to the campaign. In fact, it was after he was named, and that's precisely why Mifsud approached him. But Mifsud was described in Mueller's indictment as being Russian-connected, and everybody's talking about Mifsud being Russian-connected and going to Russia and talking to Russian people, and everyone assumed that he was a Russian agent. I think James Comey just wrote an op-ed calling Mifsud a Russian agent. But anybody with a brain can go on the internet right now and see that Mifsud's one of his closest people, his closest colleagues, is a woman named Claire Smith, who's in charge of British intelligence vetting. In other words, she's the person who decides whether somebody's an agent or not. And he teaches classes with her. He's a close friend of hers. He's always been associated with British intelligence. It's very hard not to find that in, like they say, in about 5 or 10 minutes. But he's always been, so he was clearly a guy that was sent in there to talk to Papadopoulos. It didn't happen by chance that this guy comes in, and then he was told to do it at a dinner in Rome. He has not said by whom, but he was also told to bring one of his students, and the student was to pose as Vladimir Putin's niece. So this is has the smell of a setup from the get-go. And my real point here isn't that is not to talk about the setup by the intelligence agencies, but I'm more worried about the media reporting it well.
Oh my goodness!
Had the media reported this well, right from the beginning, people would have said, "Why hire Mueller? This is really silly." There's no, and as a matter of fact, of all people to hire a special prosecutor because of James Comey. Here's James Comey leading the setup along with John Brennan. And we're hiring a special prosecutor because Comey says, well, gee, he fired me. Or the president fired me. He must be covering up this terrible Russian collusion investigation. And that's what it was about. So we have this weird situation where the president is being set up and he's being investigated precisely because he was set up and perhaps smelled a rat. I'm not here to apologize for any rhetoric or any blundering that President Trump has done. Everyone knows he's sort of a bull in a china shop. But I think we went a bit far here by investigating the guy for treason for 2 years. I mean, that's really, really bad. And so I've written about that before. In June of 17, I wrote that this was not anything at all. I said this was the elite left version of a birther conspiracy. And unfortunately, and I thought the birther conspiracy was very innocent, and people were just asking questions. But yet everyone got offended that, oh, how can you ask questions about President Obama? Now we've got someone actually accusing Trump of treason.
Yeah.
and we're bringing down the might of the government on him. And I wrote that in June of 17. I said, this is a silly investigation. I had done the research. I've looked on the internet. Can a reporter do that? I mean, I work 10 hours a day.
Well, so let's come back to that. So they clearly have an agenda, and the title of your book, folks, if you're just joining us, we're talking with John O'Connor. He is a former assistant U.S. attorney from Northern California. His book is due out in November. It's called Postgate, and the subtitle, How the Washington Post Betrayed Deep Throat, Covered Up Watergate, and Began Today's Partisan Advocacy Journalism. And that's what you're describing there when it comes to reporting on Russia collusion, sir, is this partisan advocacy journalism. They're leaving the relevant information, on the cutting room floor. And so back to what you said about how the Post failed to report the truth about Watergate, or some key details about Watergate, and you specifically mentioned the CIA. Go into that a little bit more.
Well, yeah, like I said, the way you tie them together is when people say John Dean testifies this is another Watergate. In fact, Paul, it is another Watergate, but not for the reasons stated. Let me just cast the scene at the burglary. There are 5 people that are arrested in the DNC headquarters. It's 4 Cubans who all were associated with the CIA's Bay of Pigs, one of which, Eugenio Martinez, was actually an active CIA agent on the payroll. Okay. Their supervisor on the job in the DNC was James McCord, who had just recently retired from the CIA and had been a supervisor on the Bay of Pigs invasion. And then he and Howard Hunt also had started the Second Naval Guerrilla Operation, which was a plan to reinvade Cuba. Okay, now that's odd right there. One of the supervisors is Howard Hunt, who had just recently, quote, retired, unquote, retired from the CIA, and had been doing all kinds of things from the White House that looked like they might involve the CIA. McCord was picked up at the jail when he made bail by a fellow named Pennington, who the CIA tried to hide from the investigators from Congress. They never gave him Pennington information. They lied to the FBI about the guy's identity. The FBI was searching for a guy named Pennington. Who's this Pennington? Well, the CIA lied, gave him the wrong Pennington. When the CIA finally found Cecil Pennington, Cecil Pennington says, I don't know what it says. I don't know what you're talking about. But the point is, McCord was picked up by his handler, his CIA handler, at the jail. And there are all kinds of indications that McCord was a CIA agent. Now, did this fellow retire from the CIA? And he was hired to be a security guard with the Republicans. Did he come over there to commit crimes? Of course not. He was a straight-laced guy. He's a devout Baptist. He came over there to do the CIA's work. He didn't come over to be a criminal. Howard Hunt had done all sorts of things. He had gotten the White House to approve him going into the Ellsberg psychiatrist's office and getting Ellsberg's records. Then the CIA lied to the White House and said they didn't get Ellsberg's records, and they clearly did get Ellsberg's records. That's established by one of the burglars and by Ellsberg's psychiatrist. Yes, they come through Ellsberg's records. So the CIA had these ongoing operations in which they were using the White House as dupes. The CIA could not legally operate in the United States under their charter. It was a felony for anybody to do it. However, if you had presidential authorization, then anything is okay under national security. So the White House wanted to infiltrate, or the CIA wanted to infiltrate the White House so that they could claim that the presidential authorization for the various things that they were doing. Then they would be legal. So you would get a tincture of legality if later on, 10 years down the line, some congressional committee found out that they were wiretapping a bunch of men talking to prostitutes. Then they could say, oh, look at this. We've had approval. The White House approved this.
Yeah.
Look at these receipts. Here, we bought the bugging material on a check from the DNC that had been laundered by Gordon Liddy. So that's what was going on. Uh, but the reporters knew it. They at least knew there was something like that, and they also knew that Hunt, for example, was working half time for Mullen and Company, and that Mullen and Company had its CIA connection. Woodward talks in court about how the first time the burglars are arraigned, he sees this fancy-dressed fellow who gets very nervous when Woodward confronts him. Well, that's a guy that was working for Mullen and Company. Mm-hmm. He was a lawyer with Mullen and Company. Now, why would Mullen be sending in, and he was the fellow who hired the criminal defense lawyers. Why would Mullen be sending lawyers in when these burglars are arrested?
I mean, it seems like to me, John, we need to read the book. I mean, it seems like you have done an incredible job here.
Yeah, there's no way that in a few minutes I can tell you everything that is there. But let me tell you this: everywhere you go, you say, "Wait a second. I mean, they didn't see this. They didn't find this. This didn't get reported." The reader would say, "If I knew this, I would change my view of the entire scandal." Now, it should have been there's no doubt the White House should have been covered with some shame. But on the other hand, the higher-ups in the White House did not think of this, did not know about it, did not think of this as a campaign operation. This had nothing to do with the campaign. And so it would have been a three-ring circus, not a one-ring circus, and it would have been highly interesting and entertaining for sure. But I just don't think at the end of the day it would have been the same thing. So the lesson we get from this, Paul, is unfortunately some perversion. Journalists are rock stars. They have political power. They can get rid of a president if they slant their reporting a certain way. How about that?
Yeah.
That's the real lesson we learned from Watergate. I was an assistant United States attorney at the time, and I thought, well, the lessons we've learned from Watergate is, boy, factual reporting combined with good sleuthing by the FBI, and we end up with this wonderful result, even if the result is not so great for our country. At least we're clean jeans, and the system works. And to a certain extent, it did. I mean, based on the evidence, people were convicted and so forth and so on. And in this case, the White House is technically guilty, and a lot of people committed crimes. But when you look at them, look back at them, a lot of them were fairly rinky-dink. You know, they get George Steinbrenner for a political contribution and somebody else for doing this and that. So I'm not against any of the prosecutions. I'm just saying, as a member of the public, we certainly got fooled a bit here.
Yeah, there was a lot more. There was a lot more than just coming back on the White House. That it seems like what you're saying is that it's kind of the scapegoat, and the press just refused to report on the other tributaries that would have really exposed a much larger operation. And that seems to be what you're saying.
Yeah, and then it becomes a template for what's happening today and what has happened for the last 40 years or so.
Yeah.
The press knows that if they just start getting everyone excited about a certain theme, a certain narrative, and flood the zone with things about that narrative, that the public is, everybody's busy. They take the cues from the narrative. They trust the journalists. I mean, after all, they're getting Pulitzer Prizes, and they tell us how great they are every day. And but think about this. Everyone is held accountable. Businessmen, politicians, show business people, athletes. Everyone's accountable except for one institution, the media. Who watches the watchers? Who reports on the media? Nobody, because we expect the media to do that, and it's pretty much of a monolithic outfit.
Yeah.
There are a few people, squeaking here and there, but basically it's you don't get any blowback on the media, do you?
They're almost clergy. They're almost the level of clergy. I've called them news priests. They can absolve you or condemn you based on a rotating moral scale from one day to the next.
That's brilliant, because I think what we are is we're almost in theology today. You either believe a certain thing or you don't, and they are. They create a theology, and all events are to be fit into that theology, no matter what it is. If it's Duke lacrosse, we've got a narrative all set up, and those kids are getting shoved into that narrative. And yes, and they're not going to, and the media is going to condemn you there, just the same way the priests would do it in the old days. And that's what we face today. You can say the same thing about global warming or climate change.
Yeah.
That if you dare be a skeptic, which used to be a good scientific attitude, no, that's not good. You're a denier. So you might as well say, there are not three people and one God, or so forth and so on.
Yeah, no, you make a great point. Well, I really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure to meet you, Mr. O'Connor. The book is Postgate. Folks, it's not out until November, but you can pre-order now over at Amazon.com. Postgate, How the Washington Post Betrayed Deep Throat, Covered Up Watergate, and Began Today's Partisan Advocacy Journalism. His name is John O'Connor. John, thank you so much, sir, for spending time with us this morning. We appreciate it.
Paul, it's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. All right, we'll do this again soon.